The autumn moon hung heavy over the grand assembly grounds, casting silver shadows across hundreds of werewolves gathered for the most important ceremony of the year. The moonlight ceremony was where destinies intertwined, where powerful alphas found their fated mates, where bloodlines were strengthened and alliances formed. For Alara Thornwood, it was supposed to be her last chance at redemption, though she knew in her heart it would likely be her final humiliation. Standing at the edge of the crowd, Alara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, trying to make herself invisible among the sea of supernatural beings who radiated power she could never possess. Her unusual silver hair, which she usually kept hidden under hoods and hats, now fell freely down her back as per ceremony requirements. Her violet eyes, which shifted between shades of purple and silver depending on the moon's phase, scanned the crowd nervously. These eyes were her only remarkable feature, the only hint that perhaps she carried something unusual in her blood, though no one had ever looked closely enough to wonder why. At 22, Alara had lived her entire life as a disappointment. Born into the Thornwood family, a lineage of powerful alphas who had governed the Eastern Territories for generations, she should have been destined for greatness. Her father commanded a secondary pack of over 300 wolves. Her older brother could transform into a massive black wolf that struck fear into enemies. Her mother came from a line of Luna Queens known for their wisdom and strength. But Alara had no wolf, no inner beast that awakened during puberty, no transformation under full moons, no enhanced strength or healing. She was, for all intents and purposes, human, and in the werewolf world, being human when you should be supernatural was worse than being dead. Her family had dragged her to the ceremony with one last desperate hope that perhaps some lower-ranking alpha, someone desperate for connections to the Thornwood name, might overlook her deficiency and claim her as a mate. It was a humiliating prospect, but Alara had learned to swallow her pride years ago. Pride was a luxury afforded only to those with power, and she had none. The ceremony began as the moon reached its zenith. Elder wolves, gray with age but still emanating authority, called forward the unmated alphas. One by one, powerful males stepped into the moonlight, their eyes glowing with their inner beasts, their presence making the air itself feel heavy. The unmated females were then instructed to walk past them, allowing fate to decide which bonds would form. When two destined mates came close enough, the bond would snap into place, unmistakable and undeniable, a pull that felt like two halves of a soul finally reuniting. Alara watched as successful matches formed, as powerful alpha males claimed beautiful she-wolves who gazed at them with awe and desire. Each successful pairing was met with cheers and howls of celebration. With each match, Alara felt herself shrinking further into insignificance, hoping the ceremony would end before anyone remembered she was there. Then the air changed. A presence so powerful that even the celebrating wolves fell silent entered the grounds. Alara felt it before she saw him, a pressure against her chest that made breathing difficult, a weight that seemed to bend reality itself around its source. The crowd parted like water, and through the gap walked the most commanding male Alara had ever seen. Kyle Nightshade, the Alpha King of the North American territories, ruler of the largest werewolf kingdom on the continent, and quite possibly the most powerful alpha alive. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his body sculpted with predatory muscle that moved with lethal grace beneath his black formal attire. His hair was jet black and fell just past his shoulders, framing a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and cruel beauty. But it was his eyes that captured attention, molten gold that seemed to glow from within, eyes that had reportedly never shown mercy to an enemy, eyes that could make even other alphas submit with a single glance. Kyle Nightshade was known for his ruthlessness. He had taken the throne at 18 by challenging and killing his own tyrannical father in single combat. In the decade since, he had transformed his kingdom through a combination of brutal efficiency and uncompromising standards. He demanded perfection from his pack, culled the weak without hesitation, and had famously rejected 3 potential mates because they did not meet his exacting requirements. Rumors said he was searching for a mate who could match his power, someone worthy of standing beside him as queen, someone who would produce heirs strong enough to carry his bloodline forward. Ilara felt her stomach drop when the elder wolves announced that the Alpha King himself had decided to participate in the moonlight ceremony, an unprecedented honor for their assembly. Every unmated female in the crowd suddenly stood straighter, hope blazing in their eyes. Even mated females looked at him with barely concealed desire. Ilara wanted nothing more than to disappear, to slip away before anyone remembered she was technically supposed to walk past him like the others. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. The moment Kale Nightshade stepped into the ceremonial circle, his golden eyes locked onto Ilara with laser. Focus. The world seemed to stop. Ilara felt it then, a sensation she had never expected to experience. The mating bond snapping into place with such force that she gasped audibly. It felt like a rope of pure energy connecting her heart to his, pulling tight, making her aware of him in a way that transcended normal senses. She could feel his surprise, his shock, and then something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Or hunger. The crowd noticed immediately. Hundreds of eyes turned to Ilara, watching as the impossible happened. The Alpha King had found his fated mate, and it was the worthless Thornwood girl who could not even shift. The silence was deafening. Ilara stood frozen as Kale began walking toward her, his expression unreadable. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her body would not obey, held in place by the bond that hummed between them. Kale stopped directly in front of her, so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Up close, his presence was overwhelming, a physical force that made her knees weak. For a moment, just a brief, flickering moment, she saw something in those golden eyes that might have been wonder. The bond thrummed between them, and despite everything, despite knowing what she was and what she lacked, Ilara felt a spark of hope. Fated mates were sacred. The moon goddess herself chose these pairings. Perhaps, just perhaps, this meant she was not as worthless as everyone believed. Then Kale spoke, his voice deep and cold as winter. "What is your name?" It was not a gentle question. It was a demand from a king to a subject. Ilara forced herself to answer despite her trembling. "Ilara Thornwood. Alpha King." She saw his eyes narrow. "Thornwood? Where is your wolf, Ilara Thornwood?" The question hung in the air, like an executioner's blade. Ilara felt every eye on her, felt the weight of her shame crushing down. "I have no wolf, Alpha King. I was born without one." The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Kel's expression transformed from neutral assessment to cold disgust in an instant. The bond between them pulsed with his emotions, revulsion and anger, and something that felt like betrayal, as if she had personally offended him by existing. When he spoke again, his voice carried across the entire assembly grounds, ensuring everyone would hear his judgment. "The moon goddess has made a mistake. This creature before me is not a werewolf. She is a human pretending to be one of us, a stain on the purity of our bloodline, a defective thing that should never have been allowed to stand in this sacred circle. I, Kale Nightshade, Alpha King of the North American territories, reject this bond. I reject Ilara Thornwood as my mate. She is not worthy to even speak my name." The words hit Ilara like physical blows, but they were nothing compared to what came next. When an alpha rejected a fated bond, especially one as powerful as an Alpha King, the severing was not gentle. Ilara felt the connection between them, that rope of energy that had formed mere minutes ago, being ripped apart. It felt like her chest was being torn open, like someone had reached into her ribcage and was pulling out her still-beating heart. The pain was beyond anything she had ever experienced, beyond what she thought it was possible to feel and remain conscious. She collapsed to her knees, unable to even scream because her lungs would not draw air. Through the haze of agony, she was dimly aware of gasps from the crowd, of her mother's mortified face, of her father's expression of pure rage, directed not at the Alpha King, but at her. The pain went on and on, waves of it that made her vision white out. But through it all, Ilara bit her lip until it bled and refused to cry. She would not give Kale Nightshade the satisfaction of seeing her tears. She would not give any of them that satisfaction. When the pain finally receded enough for her to breathe, Ilara looked up to find Kale already walking away, dismissing her, as if she were nothing, less than nothing. The ceremony continued as if her humiliation had been merely a minor interruption. Alara managed to stand on shaking legs and walk, not toward her family who would only compound her shame, but toward the edge of the grounds and then beyond, into the darkness where no one would see her collapse again. The days following the rejection were somehow worse than the event itself. Alara had naively hoped that perhaps her family might show some sympathy, some recognition that she had been humiliated through no fault of her own. Instead, she found only blame. Her father, Alpha Marcus Thornwood, summoned her to his office the morning after the ceremony. She entered to find not just her father, but her mother and brother as well, all three regarding her with expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed hatred. Marcus did not waste time on preamble. You have brought unforgivable shame upon this family. The Alpha King himself rejected you, in front of the entire supernatural community. Do you understand what this means? Other Alphas who might have overlooked your deficiency will now never consider you because doing so would insult the King's judgment. You are unmarriageable. Useless. A burden we can no longer afford to carry. Alara felt something inside her go numb. Father, I did not ask for the bond. I did not want to be matched with him. How is this my fault? Her mother, Luna Catherine, laughed bitterly. Of course it is your fault. If you had any value at all, if you had even the weakest wolf, perhaps he would have been merciful. But no, you are completely powerless, an embarrassment that has now tainted our entire bloodline. People are already whispering that perhaps the Thornwood blood has become corrupted, that our power is fading. Your brother may have difficulty finding a proper mate now, because of you. Her brother Derek stepped forward with barely restrained violence in his eyes. I have spent my entire life working to honor this family, to prove myself worthy of eventually taking Father's place. In one night, you have undone years of my effort. I will be mocked for having a wolfless sister, questioned about whether I carry the same defect. You have destroyed my future. Marcus held up a hand, silencing Derek. His next words were delivered with cold finality. Alara Thornwood, you are hereby banished from Thornwood lands. You have 48 hours to gather your belongings and leave. You are forbidden from using the Thornwood name or claiming any connection to this pack. As far as we are concerned, you do not exist. If you are found on our territory after the deadline, you will be treated as a rogue and dealt with accordingly. Alara stared at her father, searching for any hint of the man who had once, long ago when she was very small, held her gently and called her his little moon. There was nothing. Whatever love he might have had for her had been completely erased by disappointment and wounded pride. She looked to her mother and saw only a stranger's face. She looked at her brother and saw an enemy. In that moment, Alara understood with perfect clarity that she had never truly had a family. She had been tolerated as long as there was hope she might somehow become useful. But now that even that faint possibility had been eliminated, she was simply garbage to be discarded. I understand, Alpha, Alara said quietly, using his title rather than calling him Father, severing that connection herself since he clearly already had. I will be gone within the day. You will never see me again. She turned and walked out of the office with her head held high, refusing to let them see how completely they had shattered her. She had 48 hours, but Alara did not need that long. Within 6 hours, she had packed a single backpack with clothes, what little money she had saved, and a few practical supplies. She left behind everything else, all the trinkets, and memories of a life that had never really been hers. She walked out of the Thornwood mansion without looking back, passed through the packlands where wolves who had known her since childhood watched her leave without a single word of farewell or sympathy, and crossed the boundary markers into neutral territory as the sun set on her old life. For 3 weeks, Alara wandered aimlessly through human towns and cities, staying in cheap motels when she could afford them, and sleeping in her car when she could not. She picked up temporary work where she could find it, washing dishes, cleaning houses, anything that paid cash and did not ask too many questions. The work was hard and the pay was minimal, but it kept her fed and gave her something to focus on, besides the hollow ache in her chest where her heart used to be. She quickly discovered that living among humans when you had been raised in the supernatural world was jarring in ways she had not anticipated. Humans moved through life, blissfully unaware of the predators that walked among them. unaware of the complex hierarchies and ancient laws that governed the hidden world. Ilara found their innocence both refreshing and exhausting. She did not belong with them any more than she had belonged with the werewolves. She was caught between worlds, fitting into neither. The loneliness was crushing. Ilara had never had many friends even within her pack, her lack of wolf making her an outcast, but she had at least been around. Others of her kind had at least been part of something larger than herself, even if that participation was reluctant. Now she was truly alone, and the silence of her own mind, empty of the inner voice that every werewolf possessed, the voice of their wolf, was deafening. On the night of the new moon, exactly 4 weeks after her banishment, Ilara found herself driving on a remote highway, with no particular destination in mind. She was exhausted, not just physically, but existentially, tired in a way that sleep could not fix. As midnight approached, she pulled off onto a side road that led deep into an ancient forest, the kind of old-growth woodland that humans had somehow missed during their relentless expansion. She parked her car and began walking into the trees, drawn by something she could not name, a pull that felt similar to the mating bond, but older, deeper, more fundamental. She walked for what felt like hours, though time seemed strange under the canopy of ancient trees. Eventually, she emerged into a clearing that should not have existed, a perfect circle of grass surrounded by trees that had to be thousands of years old. In the center of the clearing stood a woman, and Ilara knew immediately that this was no ordinary person. The woman appeared ageless, her skin luminous in the darkness, her hair flowing around her like liquid silver, her eyes holding the depth of millennia. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from moonlight itself, and the air around her shimmered with power so intense it made Ilara's teeth ache. "Ilara Thornwood," the woman said, her voice like music and thunder combined. "I have been waiting for you." Ilara stopped walking, suddenly aware that she should probably be afraid, but finding that she was not. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, and it was like watching the moon rise. "I am called Selene, though I have had many names across the ages. I am one of the last guardians of the moon, keeper of ancient knowledge, protector of forgotten bloodlines. And you, child, are the reason I have remained in this world when all my sisters have long since passed into the beyond." Ilara felt her heart begin to race. "I don't understand. I'm nobody. I'm powerless." Selene's expression shifted to something like pity mixed with steel. "That is what they told you. That is what they believe. But they are wrong. And their ignorance has nearly cost us everything. Come, sit with me, and I will tell you the truth about what you are." They sat on the grass in the center of the clearing, and Selene began to speak. Her words painted a history that Ilara had never been taught, a hidden past that the modern werewolf world had either forgotten or deliberately erased. She spoke of a time thousands of years ago when werewolves were not simply humans who could transform into wolves, but beings who existed in perfect balance with the lunar cycles, drawing power directly from the moon itself. Among these ancient werewolves, there had been a rare bloodline called the Lunaris. Unlike common werewolves who possessed an inner wolf as a separate entity, the Lunaris were born with their essence completely merged with lunar energy. They did not transform into wolves because they did not need to. They were, in the truest sense, children of the moon goddess herself, living conduits for her power. The Lunaris could control the transformations of other werewolves, could strip an alpha of his wolf with a thought, could heal injuries that would kill any other being, could channel raw lunar energy as a weapon more devastating than any claw or fang. They were revered as living gods, as the ultimate authority in werewolf society. But power, as always, bred fear and resentment. As the centuries passed and the Lunaris remained rare while common werewolves multiplied, ambitious alphas began to see them not as leaders, but as obstacles to their own dominance. A conspiracy formed, and over the course of several generations, the Lunaris were systematically hunted down. The genocide was brutal and thorough. Alphas spread lies that the Lunaris were abominations, that their lack of wolf form meant they were corrupted, that they threatened the purity of werewolf bloodlines. One by one, the Lunaris families were destroyed, until it was believed that the bloodline had been completely eradicated. But they were wrong, Celine said, her eyes glowing with inner light. A handful survived by hiding their true nature, by allowing themselves to be seen as powerless humans married into werewolf families. They passed down the bloodline in secret, each generation hoping that someday it would be safe for a Lunaris to awaken again. Your great-great-great-grandmother was one of those survivors, and the bloodline has been sleeping in your family ever since, waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances, the right vessel. Alara felt like the world was tilting beneath her. You're saying I'm one of these Lunaris? But I don't have any power. I can't do any of the things you described. Celine reached out and took Alara's hands in her own. The moment they touched, Alara felt it, a surge of energy that had been locked away inside her entire life, dormant and waiting. It was like suddenly becoming aware of a limb she had never known she possessed, a sense that expanded her perception of reality. Your power has been dormant, because awakening a Lunaris bloodline requires two things. First, profound trauma, an experience that breaks down the barriers between your conscious self and your lunar essence. The rejection by your fated mate, especially one as powerful as the Alpha King, and the subsequent banishment from your family provided that trauma. Second, it requires proximity to a lunar nexus during the new moon, when the veil between the physical and spiritual is thinnest. This clearing is one of the few remaining nexus points. And tonight is the new moon. You were drawn here because your bloodline recognized the opportunity to finally awaken. Alara pulled her hands back, fear suddenly overwhelming her curiosity. I don't want power. I just want to be left alone, to find some quiet corner of the world where I can forget everything that happened. Celine's expression hardened. That is no longer an option. Your awakening has already begun. The moment you entered this clearing, the moment we touched, the process became irreversible. Within the next lunar cycle, your Lunaris nature will fully manifest. Whether you want it to or not, you have a choice now. But it is not whether to have power. It is whether you will learn to control that power, or be consumed by it. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Alara wanted to run, to reject this revelation as some kind of trick or delusion. But deep inside, in a place she had never been able to access before, she felt the truth of it. Something was changing within her, something vast and ancient stirring to life after centuries of sleep. If what Celine said was true, if she really was about to manifest powers beyond anything modern werewolves possessed, then doing so without training would likely result in catastrophe. What would training involve? Alara asked quietly. Celine's smile was approving, but sad. Pain, growth, transformation. I will not lie to you, child. Awakening your full Lunaris powers will be the most agonizing experience of your life. Your body will need to be restructured on a cellular level. Your mind will need to expand to accommodate senses you never had. Your spirit will need to be forged in lunar fire until it is strong enough to channel the moon's power without shattering. Many who have attempted this training in ages past did not survive. Those who did were forever changed, unable to return to the simple lives they once lived. But I would be powerful, Alara said, and she was surprised by the steel in her own voice. I would never be weak again. No one would ever be able to hurt me or cast me aside like I was nothing. Celine nodded slowly. Yes, you would be powerful beyond measure. But power is not the same as happiness, child. The Lunaris who lived in the ancient times were revered, but they were also isolated. Their power made them different, separate. You must understand that if you walk this path, you will never again fit into the normal werewolf world. You will be something other, something more and something less simultaneously. Alara thought about her father's cold dismissal, her mother's disgusted face, her brother's hatred. She thought about Kale Nightshade's cruel rejection, the way he had looked at her like she was garbage beneath his notice. She thought about a lifetime of being told she was worthless, of being made to feel like her very existence was a mistake. And she thought about having the power to ensure that no one could ever make her feel that way again. I want to train, Alara said firmly. I want to become what I was meant to be. I don't care about the pain or the cost. I refuse to be weak ever again. Celine studied her for a long moment, then nodded. So be it. We begin tonight. By the time the next full moon rises, You will have taken your first steps toward becoming the goddess of the moon that the ancient prophecies foretold. And when you are ready, you will return to the werewolf world, not as the powerless girl they rejected, but as the force that will reshape their entire civilization. The training began immediately and was every bit as brutal as Celine had promised. That first night, Celine guided Alara through a meditation that opened pathways in her mind that had been sealed shut her entire life. The sensation was like having her skull pried open, and Alara screamed until her voice gave out. But when the process was complete, she could suddenly feel the moon above them despite the trees blocking her view, could sense its position and phase and pull with perfect clarity. Over the following days, Celine taught Alara to draw lunar energy into her body in tiny amounts, just enough to light a small orb of silver light in her palm. Even that small manifestation left Alara drained and shaking, her body unaccustomed to channeling power. But each day it became slightly easier. Celine pushed her relentlessly, allowing no rest, no mercy. When Alara collapsed from exhaustion, Celine would revive her with a touch and make her begin again. As the weeks passed, Alara's control grew. She learned to create shields of solidified moonlight that could deflect physical attacks. She learned to enhance her physical capabilities temporarily, moving with speed that blurred her form, striking with strength that shattered stone. She learned to sense other supernatural beings, feeling their presence like bright flames in her awareness. Each new ability came with a cost, pushing her body and mind to their limits and beyond. The true transformation came on the night of the full moon, 3 months into her training. Celine led Alara back to the clearing and told her it was time for the full awakening. Until now, Alara had been accessing only the surface of her Lunaris nature, like dipping a toe into an ocean. Tonight, she would dive into its depths and either emerge reborn or be destroyed in the attempt. Celine inscribed a circle of silver runes around Alara, ancient symbols of power that glowed with their own inner light. As the full moon rose above the clearing, Celine began to chant in a language so old that the words themselves carried weight and power. Alara felt the lunar energy building around her, pressing in from all sides. And then, with a rush like a dam breaking, it poured into her body all at once. The agony was indescribable. Every cell in Alara's body felt like it was being torn apart and rebuilt simultaneously. Her bones lengthened and became denser, capable of channeling far more power. Her muscles restructured themselves into patterns that did not exist in normal physiology. Her nervous system expanded, growing new pathways that connected her to the lunar energy field that permeated the world. Her skin began to glow with soft silver light, and when she looked down at her arms, she saw intricate patterns emerging like luminescent tattoos, ancient runes that marked her as Lunaris. But the physical changes were nothing compared to what was happening to her mind and spirit. Alara felt her consciousness expanding outward, suddenly aware of every werewolf within miles, feeling their emotions and their power levels like individual notes in a vast symphony. She could sense the moon above her, not just as a distant object, but as a living presence, a goddess who acknowledged her as kin. Power flooded through her in waves that should have killed her, but instead forged her into something that could withstand it. The transformation lasted for hours. When it finally ended, Alara collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. But she was alive. More than alive. She felt more real than she ever had before, as if her entire previous existence had been a fated dream, and only now was she truly awake. She pushed herself to her feet and looked at Celine, who was smiling with satisfaction and exhaustion. "You have done it, child. You are Lunaris now, fully awakened. How do you feel?" Alara stretched, feeling the power humming through her veins, coiled and ready. Her eyes, which had always shifted between violet and silver, now glowed with steady silver light. The runes on her arms pulsed in time with her heartbeat. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that had not been there before. "I feel alive. I feel powerful. I feel like I could reshape the world with my bare hands." She paused, then added more quietly, "And I feel angry. So incredibly angry at everyone who made me believe I was worthless when I carried this inside me all along." Celine's expression became serious. "That anger is natural, but it is also dangerous. The Lunaris of old fell not because they were weak, but because they allowed their power to make them arrogant. They forgot that power without wisdom is simply destruction. You have awakened your abilities, but now comes the harder training. Learning to master yourself. To use your power not for revenge, but for purpose. For the next 3 months, Selene focused on teaching Elara control and philosophy. She showed her how to suppress her aura so she could move among werewolves undetected when needed, how to focus her power with surgical precision rather than overwhelming force, how to read the lunar cycles and draw maximum strength during optimal phases. But more importantly, she taught Elara about responsibility, about the burden that came with being the most powerful being in any given space. Selene shared stories of the ancient Lunaris, both their triumphs and their failures. She told of Lunaris queens who had governed with wisdom and compassion, using their power to protect the weak and maintain balance. But she also told of Lunaris who had been corrupted by their own strength, who had become tyrants worse than any alpha, who had ultimately been destroyed by those they oppressed. Power reveals character. It does not create it, Selene taught. You must decide what kind of being you wish to become. Elara listened and learned, but the anger never fully left her. She dreamed often of the moment Kael had rejected her, of her father's cold dismissal, of a lifetime of being made to feel less than. The power within her wanted to be used, wanted to show all of them how wrong they had been. Selene seemed to sense this struggle, and did not try to suppress it. Your anger is part of you, and denying it would be dishonest. But you must learn to channel it, to use it as fuel, rather than allowing it to use you. If you enjoyed this story so far, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more supernatural romance stories that will keep you captivated. 6 months after entering Selene's clearing, on the night of another full moon, Selene finally told Elara it was time. You are ready to return to the werewolf world. Your training is not complete. It never truly will be. But you have mastered enough to survive and to fulfill your purpose. Elara looked at her mentor, this ageless being who had given her everything. What is my purpose? Selene's eyes glowed like miniature moons. To restore balance. The werewolf world has fallen into corruption. Alphas rule through fear and brutality, hoarding power while their pack members suffer. The old codes of honor, of using strength to protect rather than oppress, have been forgotten. You must become what the ancient prophecy spoke of, the goddess of the moon, who would arise in the darkest times to judge the unworthy and guide the supernatural world back toward the light. And Kael? Elara asked quietly. What about the Alpha King who rejected me? Selene's expression was unreadable. That is complicated. The fated mate bond that once existed between you was severed, but the potential for it remains in both of your souls like a scar. With your awakened power, you could reforge that bond, but it would have to be by choice, not by destiny. More importantly, Kael Nightshade is the most powerful alpha in the modern world, and his kingdom sets the example that others follow. If you wish to truly change werewolf society, you must change him first, or remove him from power entirely. Elara felt her power surge in response to her emotions, silver light crackling around her fingers. I'm not interested in reforming him. He showed me exactly what he is. I'm interested in making sure he and every alpha like him understands that their reign of cruelty is over. Selene placed a hand on Elara's shoulder, and the touch was grounding. Remember, vengeance and justice are not the same thing. If you return to their world seeking only to hurt those who hurt you, you will become no better than they are. But if you return seeking to create a better world, one where no one else suffers as you did, then you will be worthy of the power you carry. How will I know the difference? Elara asked. How will I know if I'm seeking justice or just revenge? Selene smiled sadly. You will know by whether you can show mercy when you have the power to destroy. True strength is not the ability to hurt others. It is the ability to choose not to when every part of you wants to. The Lunaris of old who survived longest were those who understood this. With those words echoing in her mind, Elara prepared to leave the sanctuary where she had been reborn. Celine gave her robes of silver fabric that seemed to absorb and reflect moonlight, garments that would mark her as something beyond ordinary werewolves. She gave her a staff carved from ancient wood and capped with moonstone that could focus her power for greater effects. And she gave her one final piece of advice. There is a gathering happening in 3 days. The Grand Conclave, where all the alphas of North America meet to discuss territorial disputes and political matters. It takes place in Kale Nightshade's kingdom. If you wish to make a statement, to announce your presence and purpose to all of Werewolf Society at once, that would be the place to do it. Alara smiled, and it was not a gentle expression. Perfect. Let them gather. Let them feel safe and powerful in their little kingdom. And then I'll show them what real power looks like. She embraced Celine, this guardian who had saved her life and soul. Thank you for everything. I won't forget what you've taught me. Celine held her tight. Remember, child, you carry the hopes of all those who have suffered under corrupt alphas. Do not let your personal pain overshadow your greater purpose. Be the goddess they need, not just the weapon I helped you become. With those words, Alara left the clearing for the last time, walking back into a world that had cast her out, but returning as something they could never have imagined. The journey to the North American territories took 2 days, during which Alara practiced maintaining her suppressed aura. She did not want to announce her presence until the perfect moment. She passed through werewolf territories undetected, invisible to the guards and patrols, who could not sense what she truly was when she chose to hide it. As she approached the capital of Kale's kingdom, she could feel the concentration of powerful werewolves gathered for the conclave. Alphas from dozens of packs, all bringing their strongest warriors, all radiating dominance and aggression. It was a powder keg of supernatural testosterone, exactly what she needed. Let them feel powerful. Let them feel secure in their hierarchies and their strength. The fall would be so much more dramatic. The conclave was held in a massive amphitheater built into the side of a mountain, a space designed to hold thousands of werewolves. Alara waited until the opening ceremony was underway, until all the alphas were seated in their assigned sections, until Kale himself was standing at the center podium, addressing the assembly about territorial boundaries and resource allocation. Then she simply walked in through the main entrance, making no effort to hide her presence anymore. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The moment Alara released her suppressed aura, every werewolf in the amphitheater felt it. Conversations died mid-sentence. Posturing alphas froze in place. Warriors who had been standing guard dropped to one knee involuntarily, their wolves submitting to a power they instinctively recognized as superior. The pressure of Alara's presence rolled through the space like a tidal wave, and even the strongest alphas, males who had never bowed to anyone, felt their knees weaken. Alara walked down the central aisle toward the podium, her silver robes flowing around her, her eyes glowing with lunar light, the runes on her arms visible and pulsing with power. She moved with unhurried grace, allowing them all to see her clearly, to recognize her if they could. The silence was absolute, broken only by her footsteps echoing through the stone amphitheater. Kyle stood at the podium, his expression frozen between shock and disbelief. His golden eyes were locked on Alara, and she could see the moment recognition hit him. The powerless girl he had rejected now radiated more authority than every alpha in the room combined. The fated bond that had once connected them flickered to life again, not as it had been, but as something new and transformed, amplified by her awakened power, until it was almost painful in its intensity. Alara stopped 10 feet from the podium and addressed Kale directly, her voice carrying effortlessly through the entire space without needing to shout, resonating with harmonics that made it clear she was something beyond ordinary werewolves. Hello, Kale Nightshade. Do you remember me? 1 year ago, you rejected me in front of hundreds because I was powerless, because I had no wolf, because I was not worthy to even speak your name. You called me a stain on the purity of the bloodline. You severed our fated bond because I was not strong enough to stand beside you. Kel's expression was complex, cycling through emotions too quickly to name, but he remained silent. The entire assembly waited, held frozen by Alara's power. She turned slowly, addressing the crowd now. 1 year ago, I was banished not just by an alpha king, but by my own family for being born different. I was told I was worthless, that I had no place in werewolf society, I was cast out to die, and no one lifted a hand to help me. You all either participated in my humiliation or stood by and watched it happen." She raised her hands, and silver light exploded from her palms, forming complex patterns in the air above the assembly. Every werewolf felt the raw power on display, energy that made even Kale's impressive strength look like a candle. Next to the sun. "I am Alara, born of the Thornwood line, but reborn as something far greater. I am Lunaris, the bloodline you all believed extinct, the power your ancestors feared so much they tried to genocide us out of existence. I am the goddess of the moon that your ancient prophecies spoke of, returned to pass judgment on those who have abused their power." The crowd erupted in whispers and gasps. Many of the older wolves clearly recognized the term Lunaris and understood the implications. Younger wolves looked confused but terrified. Kyle finally found his voice. "Lunaris are extinct. They are myths from a forgotten age. This is some kind of trick." Alara smiled coldly and gestured with one hand. Instantly, 20 of the strongest alphas in the front rows found themselves frozen in place, held immobile by invisible bonds of lunar energy. Their wolves tried to push forward, to break free through transformation. But Alara simply clenched her fist, and their transformations halted. Mid-shift, leaving them trapped between forms in obvious agony. "Does this feel like a myth?" Alara asked softly. "I can control your transformations. I can strip away your wolves as easily as removing a coat. I can feel every supernatural being within miles, know their power level, their emotional state, their intentions. I am connected to the moon itself, drawing directly from its infinite power. I am what your kind destroyed out of fear, and I have returned to restore the balance your corruption has destroyed." She released the frozen alphas, who collapsed gasping. The message was clear to everyone present. Alara could kill any of them with a thought, and there was nothing they could do to stop her. She looked back at Kyle, who stood rigid with what looked like a mixture of awe and terror. "I have not come here for revenge, though I would be justified in taking it. I have come to announce a new order. The age of alphas ruling through fear and brutality is over. I will be traveling through your territories over the coming months, and I will be evaluating each alpha, each pack leader, each warrior in a position of power. Those who have used their strength to protect and serve will be left in peace. Those who have abused their power, who have tormented the weak, who have forgotten that leadership is service, will be removed from their positions." The threat was explicit, and the amphitheater erupted in outrage. Dozens of alphas jumped to their feet, shouting challenges and threats. But Alara simply released a pulse of power that slammed them all back into their seats and held them there. When she spoke again, her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "You will not challenge me. You will not threaten me. You will accept the new order, or you will be removed from it. I am not asking for your permission. I am informing you of how things will be from this moment forward." She turned back to Kale. "And you, Alpha King, will be the first to be judged. Your kingdom sets the standard for all others. If you are found worthy, others will follow your example. If you are found wanting, your removal will send a message that no one, regardless of power or position, is above accountability." The fated bond pulsed between them, and Alara felt his complex emotions through it, shock and fear and regret and something that might have been longing, but she shut it down, refusing to let that broken connection affect her judgment. "In 1 month, I will return to pass final judgment on you, Kale Nightshade. Use that time to reflect on how you have led, on who you have become, on whether you deserve the power you hold. I suggest you use it wisely." With those words, Alara turned and walked back up the aisle, every eye following her. She paused at the entrance, looked back at the assembly one last time, and spoke a final warning. "A new age has begun for all werewolves. Those who embrace it will thrive. Those who resist will be swept away like dust before a storm. Choose wisely which side of history you wish to stand on." Then she was gone, vanishing into the night, leaving behind an assembly of shocked and terrified alphas, who suddenly had to confront the reality that their unchallenged power had just met something they could not fight, could not intimidate, and could not ignore. Kale remained standing at the podium, long after the other alphas began to disperse, staring at the entrance where Alara had disappeared, his mind reeling from the impossibility of what had just occurred. True to her word, Alara spent the following weeks traveling through Pack territories across North America. Word of the conclave spread like wildfire, and most alphas knew she was coming before she arrived. Her methods were consistent and thorough. She would arrive at a Pack's borders, announce her presence, and request a meeting with the alpha. Then she would spend days interviewing Pack members, especially the Omega and the low-ranking wolves who had no voice in Pack politics. What she discovered was both heartbreaking and infuriating. Pack after Pack revealed stories of abuse, of alphas who treated their members as property rather than family, of punishments that went far beyond justice into sadism, of resources hoarded by leadership while Pack members starved, of females treated as breeding stock rather than equals. Not every Pack was corrupt. She found several led by alphas who genuinely cared for their people and used their power responsibly. But the good leaders were depressingly rare. For those alphas who failed her judgment, Alara's punishment was swift and absolute. She would challenge them publicly, give them one chance to defend their actions, and when they inevitably failed to provide adequate justification, she would strip their wolf from them permanently. The process was agonizing for the alphas, having their supernatural nature ripped away, being reduced to ordinary humans without the strength and healing and longevity they had always taken for granted. But Alara felt no mercy for them. They had shown none to those under their power, so why should she show any to them? Once an unworthy alpha was removed, Alara would either elevate a worthy Pack member to leadership or appoint a temporary council to govern until proper leadership could be established. She made it clear that leadership was no longer about who was strongest in combat, but about who was wisest in judgment and most compassionate in action. The changes she implemented rippled through werewolf society, fundamentally altering power structures that had existed for centuries. Not everyone accepted the changes peacefully. Some alphas tried to fight back, gathering their warriors and attempting to ambush Alara when she came to their territories. These attempts were futile and usually resulted in mass casualties when Alara was forced to defend herself. After the third such incident, where an alpha had sacrificed 20 of his own warriors, in a doomed attack, Alara made an example so severe that no one else dared try the same tactic. She stripped not just the alpha, but his entire command structure of their wolves, leaving 40 powerful werewolves as powerless humans, then exiled them from all Packlands to wander the human world, forever cut off from their supernatural heritage. The message was received. Resistance shifted from overt violence to subtle undermining, but Alara could sense deception as easily as reading large print. Her ability to feel the emotions and intentions of every werewolf around her made lying to her effectively impossible. She rooted out corruption with surgical precision, and within a month, the entire political landscape of North American werewolf society had been fundamentally transformed. Through all of this, Alara kept part of her attention on Kale. The fated bond, though rejected and warped, still connected them enough that she could sense him even from hundreds of miles away. She felt his turmoil, his crisis of conscience, his desperate attempts to evaluate his own leadership objectively. She felt him making changes in his own kingdom, reaching out to Pack members he had ignored, reviewing policies that suddenly seemed cruel when examined through a lens of compassion rather than efficiency. As the month drew to a close, Alara began her journey back to Kale's territory to pass final judgment as promised. But before she arrived, something unexpected occurred. A threat emerged that put even her formidable powers to the test and forced her to confront whether she truly wanted to reshape the werewolf world or simply punish it for what had been done to her. The attack came on a moonless night as Alara traveled through a neutral forest. She felt them before she saw them. Humans, but not ordinary humans, carrying power that felt ancient and wrong. They materialized from the shadows. 12 figures wearing robes marked with symbols that predated modern language. When they spoke, their voices harmonized in unsettling ways. Lunaris, we have been waiting centuries for one of your kind to resurface. Your bloodline ends tonight. These were hunters, but not the kind that tracked werewolves for sport or safety. These were the descendants of the original conspiracy that had nearly destroyed the Lunaris bloodline millennia ago. Humans who had been given magic by ambitious alphas in exchange for eliminating the one threat to alpha supremacy. They had been waiting all this time, passing down their mission through generations, for a Lunaris to emerge again. The battle was immediate and brutal. The hunters attacked with magic that countered lunar power specifically, spells designed by ancient alphas who had studied Lunaris weaknesses. Ilara found herself actually struggling for the first time since her awakening. These humans had weapons enchanted to pierce her shields, curses that disrupted her connection to the moon, binding spells that could temporarily suppress her power. It became clear very quickly that they had been preparing for this fight for centuries, and they had no intention of failing. Ilara fought with everything she had, silver energy exploding in waves that scorched the earth, shields that deflected magical attacks, enhanced speed that let her dodge killing blows. But there were 12 of them, and they fought with the precision of a unit that had trained together for years. She managed to kill 3 and severely wound 2 others, but she was taking damage in return, her robes torn, blood running from a dozen cuts, her power beginning to wane as the curses accumulated. Just when it seemed the battle might turn against her, reinforcements arrived from an unexpected source. Kael Nightshade and 20 of his elite warriors crashed into the clearing, and the Alpha King threw himself into the fight with savage intensity. Kael tore through the hunters with brutal efficiency, his golden eyes blazing with rage. "How dare you attack her on my lands?" he roared, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. "How dare you use dark magic in my territory?" The hunters tried to turn their attention to this new threat, but splitting their focus was their downfall. With Kael's warriors engaging half of them, Ilara was able to concentrate her power on the others. Together, she and Kael decimated the remaining hunters in a display of coordinated violence that was almost beautiful in its deadly precision. When the last hunter fell, Kael shifted back to human form and walked toward Ilara, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Are you injured? I have healers who can help." Ilara looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time since her transformation. Kael was covered in blood, his own, and the hunter's, his chest heaving from exertion. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. The cold cruelty that had defined them a year ago was gone, replaced by genuine concern and something that looked like desperate hope. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. "I came here to judge you, possibly to destroy you. Why would you save me?" Kael's expression was raw with emotion. "Because I was wrong. About you. About everything. This past month, as I watched you travel through the territories, as I felt your presence through the bond we once shared, I have been forced to confront what I became. You were right at the Conclave. I have ruled through fear and cruelty, demanded perfection while showing no compassion, used my power to dominate rather than protect. I look at the changes you've made, at the pack members who now smile instead of cowering, and I am ashamed of the world I helped create." He took a step closer, and Ilara found herself not retreating. "I rejected you because you didn't fit my narrow definition of worthiness, but the truth is, I was never worthy of you. Not then, and probably not now, but watching you become this force of nature, this goddess who cares more about justice than revenge, has made me want to be better. I saved you not because I expect forgiveness, not because I think I can somehow undo the harm I caused, but because you are trying to create a world I want to live in, and I cannot let it be destroyed by zealots who fear change." Ilara felt the bond between them pulse with his sincerity, felt the depth of his remorse and his tentative hope. For a moment she was tempted to maintain her walls, to reject his words as manipulation. But her Lunaris senses could not be fooled. What Kael felt was genuine. He had changed, or at least begun the process of changing. The question was whether that change was enough, and more importantly, whether she could move past her own pain to acknowledge it. Let me know in the comments if you think Ilara should give Kael a second chance, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. "Words are easy, Kael Nightshade," Ilara said finally. "Change is measured in actions over time. You say you have realized your mistakes, but realization is only the first step. I need to see consistent transformation before I can even consider forgiving what you did to me." She paused, then added more softly, "But I acknowledge that you came when I was in danger, that you risked your life and the lives of your warriors to protect me. That counts for something." Kyle nodded, not arguing, accepting her judgment. What would you have me do? I know I'm to be judged today as you promised, but is there anything I can do to prove my sincerity? Alara considered for a long moment, then made a decision that surprised even herself. Yes. For the next 3 months, you will live as an Omega in your own pack. You will experience the vulnerability of being powerless among the powerful. You will feel what it's like to have your fate controlled by someone stronger. Only after you have walked in those shoes will you truly understand why your previous rule was unjust. The demand was unprecedented and humiliating. An alpha king reduced to the lowest rank, serving those who had once served him. Several of Kale's warriors made sounds of protest, but he silenced them with a gesture. I accept. If living as an Omega is what it takes to prove I've changed, then that's what I'll do. I have no right to refuse. Alara nodded, then placed her hand on his chest. Silver light flowed from her palm into him, and Kyle gasped as he felt his alpha power being temporarily bound, sealed away where he could not access it. When the process was complete, he stood before her as essentially a human, still larger and stronger than a normal person, but without any of his werewolf abilities. 3 months, Alara repeated. At the end of that time, if you have truly learned what I want you to learn, your power will be restored. If you have not, it will be removed permanently. Do you understand? Kale met her glowing silver eyes without flinching. I understand. And thank you for giving me this chance when I deserve none. Alara turned to his warriors. Your Alpha King has accepted judgment. Any who have issue with this may challenge me now. Not one warrior moved. They had all felt her power at the conclave, had just watched her fight 12 trained magic users. Challenging her would be suicide, and they knew it. Over the following 3 months, Alara established herself as a guardian presence throughout the werewolf territories, while simultaneously watching Kale's progress from a distance. The bond between them, still present despite everything, allowed her to sense his experiences. She felt his humiliation the first time he had to submit to a younger wolf's commands. She felt his frustration at being unable to protect himself when other wolves pushed him around. She felt his growing understanding of just how vulnerable the Omegas in his pack truly were. But she also felt moments of genuine connection, times when Kale helped another Omega who was struggling, when he offered comfort to pack members who were grieving, when he worked tirelessly at menial tasks without complaint. He threw himself into the role with total commitment, refusing to use his reputation or connections to make things easier. He wanted to experience the full reality of life at the bottom of the hierarchy. Meanwhile, Alara continued her work reshaping werewolf society. She established a council system where each region would be governed not by a single alpha, but by a group of leaders representing different aspects of pack life. Warriors, healers, teachers, and artisans all had voices in decision-making. Power was distributed, rather than concentrated, making it much harder for any single individual to become tyrannical. She also uncovered and dealt with the remnants of the hunter organization that had attacked her. With Kale's help and resources, they tracked down the surviving members and discovered they were part of a global network that had been working to keep werewolves and other supernatural beings weak and divided. Alara systematically dismantled this network, not through violence when it could be avoided, but by exposing them to supernatural communities worldwide and letting those communities deal with betrayers in their midst. Through all of this work, Alara found herself thinking about Kale more than she wanted to admit. The bond between them had become something different from the original fated connection, something that felt more chosen than destined. She could sense his genuine transformation, could feel him becoming someone she might actually respect, rather than simply being forced to desire through magical compulsion. The 3-month period ended on a night of the full moon, and Alara returned to Kale's territory for his final judgment. She found him in the Omega quarters, helping an elderly wolf prepare dinner for the others. He looked up when she entered, and the hope in his eyes was tempered with acceptance. He would not beg for his power back. She could see that. Clearly, he had learned to find value in himself beyond his supernatural strength. Walk with me, Alara said simply, and Kale followed her out into the moonlit forest. They walked in silence for some time, before Alara finally spoke. You have surprised me, Kale Nightshade. I expected you to rebel against the Omega role, to find ways to shortcut the experience, to count the days until it ended. Instead, you embraced it fully. Why? Kyle was quiet for a moment before answering. Because you were right. I spent my entire life believing that strength was the only thing that mattered. That power justified any action. Living without that power forced me to confront who I was underneath it, and I did not like what I found. I was hollow, Alara. I had built my entire identity on being the strongest, the most dominant, and when that was taken away, there was nothing left. He stopped walking and turned to face her. But over these months, I discovered I could build something new. I learned that real strength is not about dominating others, but about lifting them up. I found that I could be valuable to the pack not by ruling them, but by serving them. I learned what you tried to show me a year ago, that worth is not measured in power, but in character. So no, I did not rebel against the Omega role, because it was teaching me lessons I desperately needed to learn. Alara studied him, her Lunaris senses confirming the truth of his words, feeling the fundamental shift in his spirit. And if I restore your power now, will you return to your old ways? Will you forget these lessons once you're strong again? Kyle shook his head firmly. Never. I could not if I tried. I have seen too much, felt too much, understood too much. When you give me back my power, if you choose to do that, I will use it the way you use yours, to protect and serve, not to dominate and control. I swear this to you by the moon itself. Alara placed her hand on his chest again, over his heart, and let her power flow. Into him, the bindings she had placed dissolved, and she felt Kale's alpha nature surge back to full strength. He gasped at the rush of power returning, his eyes flashing gold, his wolf rejoicing at being freed. But when he looked at Alara again, there was no arrogance in his gaze, only gratitude and something deeper. Thank you. For the punishment, for the lessons, for the chance to become better than I was. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope that over time I can earn at least your respect. You already have, Alara said softly, surprising them both. What you did these past 3 months, submitting to judgment and genuinely changing, took more courage than anything I've seen from other alphas. Strength is easy. Real courage is admitting you were wrong and doing the hard work to change. She paused, then made a decision. I'm establishing a new ruling council for all of North America. 7 leaders who will work together to govern the werewolf territories. I want you to be one of them. Kale looked shocked. You would trust me with that much authority after everything I did? Alara smiled slightly. I don't trust who you were, but I trust who you're becoming. Besides, we need leaders who understand both the old ways and the new, who can bridge the gap between the alpha system and the more democratic approach I'm trying to establish. You're in a unique position to do that. She stepped closer to him, close enough that they were almost touching. But understand this, Kale. If you abuse this trust, if you backslide into your old patterns, I will not give you another chance. The next punishment will be permanent. I understand, Kale said solemnly, and I won't fail you. They stood there in the moonlight, 2 beings of immense power, connected by a bond that had been broken and reforged into something new. Alara felt the potential between them, the possibility of something more than just political alliance. But she was not ready to explore that yet. The wounds he had inflicted were healed but not forgotten, and trust would have to be rebuilt slowly over time. There's one more thing, Kale said hesitantly. The fated mate bond between us. It's still there in some form. I can feel it even if it's changed. Do you feel it too? Alara nodded slowly. I do. But a bond doesn't mean destiny, Kale. What we do with it is our choice now, not the moon goddesses. I'm not ready to explore that aspect of our connection, and I may never be. Can you accept that? Kale's expression was earnest. Yes, completely. If all we ever have is professional respect and alliance, that will be more than I deserve. If someday you decide you want more, I will be honored beyond measure, but I will never push, never demand, never assume. You have my word. Alara felt the truth of his promise through their connection and allowed herself a small smile. Good. Now let's get back to work. We have a new world to build, and it's going to take both of us to Make it happen. Over the following months, Elara and Kyle worked together closely to implement the new council system and continue reforming werewolf society. Their partnership was remarkably effective, combining Elara's vision and raw power with Kyle's political acumen and understanding of alpha psychology. Other leaders initially resented taking orders from someone who had recently been stripped of his authority, but Kyle's genuine humility and willingness to listen rather than dictate won over even the skeptics. The changes they implemented rippled out across the entire supernatural world. Other species, vampires and witches and fae, took notice of what was happening in werewolf territories and began examining their own power structures. Elara found herself becoming a figure of legend, the goddess of the moon, who had appeared from nowhere to reshape reality itself. Some worshipped her, some feared her, but all respected her. Through all of this, Elara remained vigilant against corruption in her own heart. She remembered Selene's warnings about Lunaris, who had been consumed by their own power, who had become tyrants worse than those they replaced. She made a point of seeking counsel from others, of listening to criticism even when it stung, of questioning her own decisions and motivations. Power had not corrupted her because she refused to let it. But the temptation was always there, a seductive whisper promising that she could reshape the world however she wished. Her relationship with Kyle evolved slowly and naturally. They spent countless hours working together, debating policy, resolving disputes, traveling to various territories. Through it all, Elara saw him consistently choose compassion over cruelty, service over domination. He never tried to leverage their bond or their history to gain advantage. He treated her as an equal colleague and friend, nothing more, respecting the boundaries she had set. 6 months after Kyle's judgment, they were traveling together to mediate a territorial dispute when they were ambushed again, this time by a rogue faction of alphas who rejected the new order entirely. These alphas had banded together in a desperate attempt to kill Elara and restore the old hierarchy. They had planned carefully, attacking during a new moon when Elara's powers were at their weakest, using silver weapons and bringing overwhelming numbers. The battle was vicious. Elara fought with everything she had, but even her Lunaris abilities had limits, and facing 30 experienced alpha warriors during her weakest phase pushed her to the edge. She took several serious wounds, silver blades cutting deep, poison working through her system. She could feel herself weakening, her power faltering. This might be the end, she realized with strange calm. After everything she had survived and accomplished, she might die here at the hands of wolves too stubborn to accept change. Then Kyle was there, throwing himself into the fight with absolute ferocity. But he did not fight alone. He had brought warriors loyal to the new order, wolves who believed in Elara's vision and would die to protect it. The battle turned into a chaotic melee, but Kyle never left Elara's side, guarding her while she tried to recover enough power to turn the tide. One of the rogue alphas, recognizing that Elara was the key to everything, broke through the defensive line and lunged at her with a silver spear aimed at her heart. Elara was too weak to dodge. Her shields were down, and she knew the strike would be fatal. But Kyle moved faster than thought, throwing himself between her and the weapon. The silver spear punched through his chest, a killing blow for any werewolf, and he collapsed at her feet, blood pouring from the wound. Something broke inside Elara at the sight of Kyle dying to protect her. The fated bond between them blazed to life with intensity it had never had before, and Elara felt power surge through her that had nothing to do with the moon and everything to do with raw, emotional connection. She screamed, and lunar energy exploded from her in a nova that incinerated every rogue alpha within 100 yards. The rest fled in terror, and silence fell over the battlefield. Elara dropped to her knees beside Kale, pressing her hands to his chest wound. Silver poisoning was deadly to werewolves, shutting down their healing factor and causing rapid death. Already his skin was turning gray, his breathing shallow and rapid. "No," Elara whispered fiercely. "No, you don't get to die. Not like this. Not for me." She poured her power into him, more power than she had ever channeled before, using her Lunaris healing abilities to their absolute limit. The process was agonizing for both of them. Elara felt every moment of his pain as she literally rebuilt his shattered heart, purged the silver from his system, knitted together torn tissue and shattered bones. She gave him so much energy that she collapsed beside him when it was done, both of them unconscious and barely alive. Kyle's warriors carried them both back to his territory, where healers worked around the clock to stabilize them. Alara woke 3 days later to find Kyle sitting beside her bed, very much alive and looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "You nearly killed yourself to save me when you could have just let me die." "Why?" Alara was too tired to maintain her usual walls. "Because despite everything, despite the history and the pain, I care about you. You're not the male who rejected me anymore. You're someone different. Someone who would die to protect not just me, but everything we're trying to build together. I couldn't let that person die." Kyle reached out and took her hand, and Alara did not pull away. "I love you," he said simply. "Not because of the fated bond, though that's part of it, but because of who you are, what you stand for, how you've transformed. Not just me, but our entire world. I love you, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that love, even if you never return it." Alara felt tears prick her eyes, the first she had cried since her transformation. "I'm not ready to say those words back, not yet, but I'm not ready either, if that makes sense. You nearly died for me, Kale. That means something. It means everything." She squeezed his hand. "Ask me again in 6 months. Let's see where we are then." Kale smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to beautiful. "I'll wait as long as it takes. We have time now. Time to heal, to grow, to see what we can become together." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, both healing from their wounds and beginning to heal from older scars as well. The months that followed were transformative for both of them. Alara finally allowed herself to explore the connection with Kale without guilt or reservation, and what she discovered surprised her. The fated bond they had once shared had evolved into something deeper and more meaningful than mere magical compulsion. They chose each other daily, consciously, not because destiny demanded it, but because they genuinely wanted to build something together. Their partnership became legendary throughout the supernatural world. The goddess of the moon and the reformed Alpha King, ruling not through domination, but through wisdom and compassion. They were not perfect. Both still carried scars from their pasts. Both still made mistakes, but they learned from those mistakes and continually strove to do better. The werewolf world they built together was revolutionary. Pack hierarchies became more fluid and democratic. Omegas had rights and protections. Females were treated as equals. Power was seen as responsibility rather than privilege. It was not a utopia. Conflicts still arose and some wolves resisted change, but it was better than what had existed before, and it continued to improve with each passing year. 6 months after their mutual near-death experience, Alara and Kyle stood together on a mountaintop, overlooking his kingdom under a full moon. Alara felt the lunar power flowing through her as always, but now it was balanced by Kale's steady presence beside her. He had not asked his question yet, the one he had said he would wait to ask, but she could sense it coming. "Kale," Alara said before he could speak, "I have something to tell you." He turned to her, golden eyes reflecting moonlight. "When I first awakened as Lunaris, I thought power was everything. I thought if I could become strong enough, I would never be hurt again. But I was wrong. True strength isn't about never being vulnerable. It's about choosing to be vulnerable with someone who has proven they'll treasure that vulnerability, rather than exploit it." She took his hands in hers. "You asked me to tell you when I was ready, and I'm ready now. I love you, Kale Nightshade. Not because the moon goddess paired us, not because you've reformed, but because you see me as I truly am, and you value that over everything else. You make me want to be better, to be the goddess our people need, rather than just the weapon I could be. With you, I'm finally whole." Kyle pulled her into his arms, and Alara let herself melt into his embrace in a way she had never allowed before. The fated bond between them blazed to life, but now it felt right rather than imposed, a connection they had both chosen, rather than one forced upon them. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. "Will you bond with me?" Kale asked when they finally pulled apart, not as fated mates forced together by destiny, but as partners who choose each other freely. "Will you stand with me as we continue building this new world?" Alara smiled, and it was a smile of pure joy rather than bitter victory. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Let's build this future together. As equals, as partners, as lovers. Let's show the world that true power comes not from domination, but from connection. They completed the bonding ceremony that night under the full moon, witnessed by Celine, who appeared for the first time in months to officiate. The guardian of the moon blessed their union, declaring them not just mates, but partners in the truest sense. Equals who would rule together, rather than one dominating the other. The bond that formed between them was unlike anything Alara had felt before, combining the fated connection with conscious choice into something transcendent. In the years that followed, Alara and Kyle's story became the foundation myth for a new era of supernatural society. The goddess of the moon who had risen from rejection and pain to become the most powerful being in their world, and the Alpha King who had the courage to admit he was wrong and transform himself completely. Together, they ruled with wisdom and compassion, their love story proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, that even the most broken bonds could be reforged into something beautiful. The final image of their story shows them years later, standing together as their first child, a daughter with silver hair and golden eyes, takes her first steps. Around them, a world they have transformed together flourishes. Better than it was. Still imperfect but always striving to improve. Alara looks at Kale and sees not the male who once rejected her, but her partner in every sense. The one who stands beside her as an equal. And she knows with absolute certainty that this is the ending she was always meant to have. Not revenge, but redemption. Not destruction, but creation. Not isolation, but love. The moon shines down on them all, and in its light, new possibilities are born every day.